The coffee mug hit the reception desk so hard that the ceramic base left a white scratch across the mahogany finish. Everyone in the lobby heard it. The woman who'd set it down, slammed it really, didn't bother looking at the person behind the desk. She was already turning back toward the elevator bank, her handbag swinging from the crook of her elbow, her heels clicking a sharp, impatient rhythm across the marble floor. "I said oat milk," she announced to no one in particular. Not whatever that was. The young man behind the reception desk, a part-timer named Ethan who'd been with the hotel only 3 weeks, stood very still. His jaw tightened, his eyes went briefly to the surveillance camera mounted above the concierge station, then back down to the scratch on the desk. He picked up the mug. He didn't say anything. The woman, Colette Fairbanks, as the platinum Amex card she'd slapped down at check-in had identified her, was the fiancée of Harrington Development's newest regional director. His name was Warren Aldridge. He'd called ahead to ensure she received every courtesy the property could offer. The property in question was the Meridian Grand, a 48-floor hotel in downtown Toronto that had been a fixture of the city's skyline for 11 years. It had a Michelin-recommended restaurant on the 34th floor, a business center that ran 24 hours, and a lobby that had been photographed for Architectural Digest twice. The woman who had just scratched the reception desk walked past all of it without a second glance. Behind the counter, Ethan exhaled slowly. He reached for the cloth beneath the desk and began wiping the rim of the mug. A few steps to his left, partially obscured by a column of golden travertine, a woman in a plain navy uniform watched him. She had a clipboard tucked under one arm and a laminated badge clipped to her breast pocket that read, "Training Support." She had short natural hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the kind of stillness that people mistake for patience but is actually something else entirely. Her name was Isabelle Okonkwo Marsh. She had held that clipboard in hotels across 4 provinces over the past 6 weeks, and no one at the Meridian Grand had any idea who she was. Not the front desk staff, not the concierge, not the floor managers she'd spoken with briefly on Tuesday, who had smiled politely at the woman from head office they assumed was there to audit the check-in workflow. Not Warren Aldridge, who had walked through this lobby 2 days ago with his hand at the small of Colette's back, not once noticing the woman in the navy uniform who had held the elevator door for them. Not Colette herself, obviously. Isabelle made a small mark on the clipboard. She uncapped her pen, wrote 3 words in the margin, then capped it again. She walked over to Ethan. "You handled that well," she said quietly enough that only he could hear. Ethan looked up. He set a careful smile. The kind hotel staff learn early. The one that means nothing while appearing to mean everything. "Thank you. Guest preferences can be tricky sometimes." "Is that what that was?" "It wasn't really a question." Ethan paused, then shook his head slightly. "No, not exactly." Isabelle nodded. She wrote something else on the clipboard, then moved toward the business center without another word. The Meridian Grand had been acquired by the Okonkwo Marsh Group 14 months ago, in what the financial press had described as a quiet consolidation of mid to premium hotel assets across Ontario and British Columbia. The coverage had been brief. There were no press conferences, no ribbon cuttings. The transaction closed on a Wednesday, and by Thursday the previous management company had begun the handover. Isabelle had not appeared in any of the coverage. This was deliberate. She had built her career methodically and without fanfare over 22 years, beginning as a guest services coordinator at a Marriott property in Winnipeg when she was 26, working through regional operations roles that took her to Calgary, Halifax, and eventually Vancouver, before the acquisition of her first independent property at 38. By 44, the group bore her name, oversaw 11 properties, and employed just over 3,000 people. She did not have a corner office with her name on the door. She had a small room on the operational floor of the group's head office in Mississauga, with a window that faced the parking structure, a standing desk, and a whiteboard covered in property codes and staff retention figures. She came to her own hotels, sometimes in uniforms that weren't her own. She had started doing it 9 years ago, after a general manager in Vancouver had handed her a glowing internal audit, while staff on the floor were quietly filing complaints about a hostile work environment. The audit had cited excellent guest satisfaction scores. The complaints had cited a duty manager who screamed at housekeepers. Both things had been true simultaneously. Isabelle had decided she needed to see for herself which truth mattered more. She still thought it did. At the Meridian Grand, she had now been present in various service roles for 4 days. She had worked a shift at the business center. She had assisted with a luggage run on the 17th floor. She had spent 2 hours in the staff break room on a Tuesday afternoon, eating a sandwich from the same vending machine the kitchen prep staff used, listening. What she had heard was mostly fine. The team was competent. The night supervisor ran a tight operation. The housekeeping lead, a woman named Bernadette who had been with the property for 6 years, managed her staff with a quiet, consistent authority that Isabelle had noted in detail. And then there was the situation at the front desk. It wasn't just Colette. Colette was a symptom. The problem was what happened after, or more precisely what didn't happen. No manager had come to check on Ethan. No duty supervisor had materialized to document the interaction. No one had offered to flag the behavior with the guest relations file. It had simply been absorbed, the way such things always were. Swallowed by the professionalism of the person on the receiving end, while the person delivering it walked away without consequence. Isabelle had watched this pattern 3 times in 4 days. Different guests, different staff members, the same dynamic. The staff member absorbed it and the institution treated the absorption as success. She wrote about it in her notebook that evening. She wrote, "We have trained our people to endure. We have not trained our culture to protect them." She underlined it twice. On the 5th day, Warren Aldridge came down to the lobby alone. He was a tall man with the posture of someone who had recently been told he was important and was still adjusting to the information. He wore a well-cut jacket and carried a leather portfolio that he didn't appear to need. He had the lobby to himself for about 30 seconds before he spotted Isabelle near the concierge station, clipboard in hand, reviewing what appeared to be a maintenance checklist. "Excuse me," he said. "Is there a manager available?" Isabelle looked up. "I can help you. What do you need?" He glanced at her badge. "Guest services, training support." His expression did a small, precise recalibration. "I meant a manager," he said. "Someone from the property team." "I'm part of the property team," Isabelle said. "What do you need?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "My fiancée was unhappy with her coffee this morning. I'd like to make sure it's handled properly." "The oat milk issue," Isabelle said. He blinked. "You know about it?" "I was in the lobby when it happened. Then you saw how she was treated." Isabelle kept her expression very neutral. "I saw how Ethan at the front desk responded to her. He was dismissive. He replaced her drink within 4 minutes and offered a complimentary pastry," Isabelle said. "I watched the whole interaction." Warren's jaw shifted slightly. He was a man who expected friction to yield when he pushed against it, and Isabelle was not yielding. "She didn't feel heard," he said finally. What would feeling heard have looked like in her case? The question landed in a way he hadn't anticipated. He opened his mouth, he closed it then. "She's a guest. She has expectations. All of our guests have expectations. We try to meet all of them." He studied her for a moment longer, decided this wasn't worth his time, and moved toward the elevator. Isabelle watched him go. She made a note on her clipboard. It was not about Warren. Colette had, in the 5 days she'd been at the Meridian Grand, done the following. Returned a room service order 3 times. Claiming it was incorrect when the tickets showed it matched her requests exactly. Berated a housekeeper in the corridor of the 22nd floor loudly enough that the guest in 2204 had filed a noise complaint. About Colette, not the housekeeper. Told the spa coordinator that her esthetician had clearly never worked anywhere worth working, and informed the front desk on 2 separate occasions that the hotel wasn't what Warren had promised. None of these incidents had been formally logged. Isabelle knew this because she had checked. The duty manager on Tuesday had been a man named Prescott, mid-30s, sharp dresser, very good at the surface performance of hospitality. When Isabelle, operating as a training support observer, had asked him how he documented guest behavior incidents, he had said they used judgment and that escalating every little thing created unnecessary tension. "With who?" Isabelle had asked. "With guests," Prescott had said. Then, after a pause, "and with the regional office." And there it was. Warren Aldridge was the regional director for Harrington Developments, which held the commercial lease on 4 floors of the Meridian Grand's office tower. It was a significant tenancy. Prescott knew it. The general manager, a pleasant, capable woman named Rosalind, no wait, that name was taken. The general manager, a pleasant, capable woman named Adeline, who had been brought in 18 months ago from a 4 Seasons property in Montreal, knew it. What neither of them had apparently considered was that managing down to a commercial tenant's personal preferences was a policy decision with consequences, and that those consequences were currently being witnessed by someone who would have thoughts about it. Isabelle sat with this for a long time on Wednesday evening in her hotel room on the 9th floor, a standard room, not a suite. Booked under a corporate rate she'd arranged through a subsidiary. She sat at the small desk by the window, looking out at the CN Tower, lit up orange and white against the November dark, and she thought about what she was going to do. She had done this before. She had walked into her own properties as a stranger and walked out with a clear picture of what the culture actually was, versus what the org chart implied it should be. She had made decisions that hadn't always been easy, and she had learned to trust the clarity that came from seeing without being seen. What she saw here was this. The staff were good. The bones of this property were solid. The problems were structural. A culture of absorption, a duty manager with misaligned priorities, and a pattern of deferring to tenancy relationships in ways that put frontline employees at risk. She could write a memo. She had written memos. Memos went through channels and arrived 6 weeks later, softened and qualified in someone's inbox. Or she could do what she had come here to do. She picked up the phone and called her assistant, a methodical man named Kofi. No, also taken. She picked up the phone and called her assistant, a methodical man named Bernard, who answered on the second ring. I need the full guest profile for room 3108 and 3110, she said. And I need the incident log from the front desk system going back 8 days. Do you want the duty manager's access log as well? Yes, I'll have it to you by 9, thank you. She hung up and turned back to the window. Somewhere above her, 22 floors up, Colette Fairbanks was probably ordering room service and deciding it was wrong. Isabelle was not thinking about Colette. She was thinking about Ethan, standing behind the reception desk with a scratched surface and a cloth in his hand saying, guest preferences can be tricky sometimes. She was thinking about the housekeeper on the 22nd floor whose name, Isabelle had quietly confirmed, was Margaret. 41 years old, 9 years with the property, a performance record that was, without exception, exemplary, standing in a corridor while a guest raised her voice, and not a single manager materializing. She was thinking about what it cost a person to absorb things, day after day with nowhere for it to go. On Thursday morning, Isabelle was back in the lobby at 7:45. She had traded the navy uniform for a different one. This time the gray and cream of the hotel's concierge team, borrowed from a spare in the staff room. She had her clipboard. She had her reading glasses on her head. She looked exactly like what the badge said she was, someone from the support team doing an audit not worth noticing. Colette came down at 8:15. She was dressed for something, a lunch perhaps, or a meeting, in a cream blazer and dark trousers, her hair done, her bag the kind that signaled intent. She moved through the lobby with the absolute certainty of someone who expected the room to rearrange itself around her. She stopped at the concierge desk. The concierge on duty was a young woman named Simone. No, that name was taken too. The concierge on duty was a young woman named Blythe, who had been with the hotel 14 months and who smiled with genuine warmth at every guest, including the difficult ones, and especially including this one. Good morning, Blythe said. Can I help you? I need a car to the Hazelton at noon, Colette said. She was looking at her phone. Absolutely, I'll arrange that for you. May I have your room number? 3108. Warren Aldridge's reservation. She still hadn't looked up. Of course, and your name for the booking? Now Colette looked up, slowly, with an expression that communicated without ambiguity that the question was beneath her. Fairbanks, she said. Colette Fairbanks. It should already be in the system. Blythe checked. I see the reservation, yes. I'll have a car confirmed for you by 11:30. 11:15, Colette said. I don't like waiting in lobbies. Of course, 11:15. Colette had already turned to leave. Then she turned back as if she'd remembered something. She looked at Blythe. Then she looked for the first time at Isabelle, standing slightly behind and to the left with the clipboard, apparently reviewing something on a printed sheet. Is she supposed to be here? Colette said. Blythe blinked. I'm sorry? Her. Colette gestured toward Isabelle with one hand, a dismissive little flick. She's just standing there. It looks sloppy. Isabelle looked up from the clipboard. She met Colette's gaze with an expression that was entirely composed. I'm observing the check-in flow, Isabelle said. It's part of the training support process. I don't know what that means, Colette said. It looks like loitering. I'll try to be less conspicuous, Isabelle said. Colette held her gaze for a moment. There was something in Isabelle's stillness that seemed to require more effort to dismiss than expected. Then Colette made a small sound, not quite a word, and walked back toward the elevator. Blythe exhaled silently. She glanced at Isabelle. Isabelle gave her a small nod and wrote something on the clipboard. Then she walked to the business center, sat down at one of the workstations and sent an email to her assistant. One line. Can you confirm Adeline is available tomorrow at 10? The reply came back in 4 minutes, confirmed. Her office or yours? The boardroom. And please have HR on standby. I'll explain when I see you. The general manager's name properly was Adeline Morel. She had grown up in Laval, studied hospitality management at UQAM, and had run hotels in 3 provinces before arriving at the Meridian, Grand. She was organized, perceptive, and genuinely committed to the property. She was also, Isabelle had concluded, operating in a structure that did not give her the tools she needed. They met at 10 o'clock in the boardroom on the 6th floor. Bernard was there, and 2 people from Isabelle's operations team who had driven in from Mississauga that morning. Adeline came in with her own notebook, and the expression of someone who had spent the morning trying to figure out exactly what this meeting was. She had not been told who she was meeting. Isabelle was waiting for her in the boardroom when she arrived, still in her own clothes now, not a uniform, not a badge, just a well-fitted dark green blazer and the reading glasses still pushed up on her forehead, which was a habit she'd had for so long she'd stopped noticing it. Adeline walked in, saw the room, saw Bernard, saw the 2 operations people, and then saw Isabelle. She stopped. I'm sorry, Adeline said. I was told I was meeting with someone from the ownership group. You are, Isabelle said. She extended her hand. Isabelle Okonkwo Marsh. I've been on property since Monday. The pause that followed was the kind that contained several things at once. Recognition, recalculation, the fast and quiet cataloging of every interaction over the past 5 days. Adeline shook her hand. You've been here since Monday, she said. Yes, as the training support observer, among other things. Adeline sat down. To her credit, she did not look defensive. She looked after a moment like someone who was deciding to be honest rather than careful. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't, Isabelle said. That was the point. She opened her notebook. She didn't begin with the problems. She began deliberately with what was working. Because the list was real and it was long and because Adeline deserved to hear it. The housekeeping team. The night operations. The kitchen, which ran with a consistency that was genuinely impressive. Ethan at the front desk, who had handled 5 days' worth of difficult interactions with more grace than anyone had a right to expect. Adeline listened. She took notes. Then Isabelle turned to the other list. She walked through the incident documentation, or rather, the absence of it. She walked through the pattern of behavior that had occurred in public spaces over the past week, and the institutional non-response. She walked through her conversation with Prescott about using judgment on escalations, and what that had actually meant in practice. She did not frame it as an indictment. She framed it as a structure problem, which was what it was. The Harrington lease, Adeline said, when Isabelle paused. Yes, Prescott flagged it as a relationship to protect. I understand why he flagged it, Isabelle said. The problem isn't that he noticed the relationship. The problem is what he decided it meant for how staff were allowed to be treated. Adeline was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to talk about that, Isabelle said. But first I want to hear from you. You've been running this property for 18 months. What do you think the right outcome is? It was the question Adeline hadn't been expecting, and it was the one that mattered most. She thought about it. Not quickly. She looked at her notebook for a moment, then back up. I think Prescott needs to understand that his job is to protect the staff as much as the guest relationship, she said. I think we need a formal process for documenting guest behavior incidents, so that the people on the floor aren't absorbing things in silence. And I think, she paused, I think the Harrington tenancy is a commercial matter and it should stay separate from how we treat the people who work here. Yes, Isabelle said, all of that. She wrote something in her notebook. I'm going to ask you to put together a proposal, documentation process, staff support protocol, how you want to handle the conversation with Prescott. I want it within 2 weeks. I want your recommendations, not mine. You know this property better than I do. Adeline nodded. Then she said, Are you planning to speak with the Aldridge party before they check out? Isabelle thought about it. No, she said. The Aldridge reservation is a commercial relationship. Warren Aldridge's professional conduct is his own business. What happens inside this hotel is mine. She paused. Colette Fairbanks checked in as his guest. That behavior is documented now. If she returns, the documentation follows. Adeline wrote something down, then she looked up. Can I ask, why do you do this in person? The observation. You could send an audit team. Isabelle considered the question. It wasn't the first time someone had asked it. Audit teams tell you what the numbers show, she said. What I want to know is what the culture is. Those aren't the same thing. She uncapped her pen. And the only way to know what a culture actually is, not what it claims to be but what it actually is to be in it. At the counter, in the break room, in the corridor when nobody knows they're being observed. She set the pen down. I didn't come here looking for failures, she said. I came here looking for character. In the people who work here, in the structure we've built around them, and in the gaps between those two things. She looked at Adeline steadily. I found all three. Margaret was ending her shift when Adeline stopped her in the staff corridor on the 8th floor. She was a compact, precise woman with the kind of weariness that comes from years of physical work done carefully and well. She had her cart in front of her and a set of keys in her hand, and she looked at the general manager with the expression of someone who has been pulled aside after a shift before and knows it can go in several directions. You're not in trouble, Adeline said immediately. I want to be clear about that first. Margaret waited. I owe you an apology, Adeline said. What happened in the corridor on the 22nd floor, the incident on Monday, it wasn't documented and it should have been. You should have had a manager there. You should have had support. Margaret was still for a moment. These things happen, she said. The automatic answer, the absorbed answer. They do, Adeline said. And when they do, there should be a process. There's going to be one now. She paused. I wanted to tell you personally. Margaret looked at her. Something in her expression shifted, not dramatically, not with tears or speeches, just a small, careful softening, the kind that happens when a person realizes they were seen without quite expecting it. Okay, she said. Thank you. Adeline nodded. She started to leave, then turned back. 9 years, she said. That's a long time to do good work. Margaret looked down at the cart. It's a good hotel, she said. It's mostly a good hotel. Adeline let that sit. We're working on the mostly, she said. Ethan was at the front desk the next morning when a woman came down to the lobby at 7:30, carrying a coffee in a paper cup from the Tim Hortons across the street. She stopped at the desk. She set the cup down in front of him, carefully, gently. Good morning, Isabelle said. I wanted to say thank you before I checked out. You handled a difficult week with a lot of class. Ethan looked at the coffee, then at her. He had not been told who she was. He would not be told today. Thank you, he said. Is there anything I can help you with before you leave? No, she said. I think this hotel has everything it needs. She picked up her bag, crossed the lobby, and walked out through the glass doors into the gray Toronto morning. On the front desk, the scratch in the mahogany was still there, faint but visible, a thin white line where something hard had landed. Ethan ran his finger along it, just once. Then he turned back to the screen and the morning began.